1980 Kennedy High School graduate Brian Gardner enjoyed learning in several classrooms across the Cedar Rapids schools while growing up.
We moved around a little bit. I started out at Grant Wood. I closed down Lincoln. I closed down the old Taylor and opened up the new Taylor. And then I was over at Wilson, and then we moved, and I ended up finishing out at Kennedy. I wasn't an overachiever, perhaps, in high school, and may have taken some shortcuts, but I did enjoy my time there, and I think that what I learned in high school certainly allowed me to be successful later in college and certainly later in life. I enjoyed the technical aspect of drafting. That was kind of cool. And I liked being able to put my concentrated efforts on doing something a little bit more technical.
As a high school student, he also spent much of his time shadowing for his future in law enforcement, which he discovered a bit by accident.
I was kind of maybe a nerd, I suppose you could say. And what I ended up doing was spending a lot of my time in school writing with law enforcement officers, what you would refer to perhaps as a Boy Scout Explorer program. I had a neighbor. We moved between the time I was at Wilson and the time that I was at Kennedy to the outskirts of Cedar Rapids, but I stayed in the Cedar Rapids Community School District. And a sergeant from the sheriff's office moved in at about the same time in a new development. And one day he came down and wanted to know if I wanted to do a ride-along. So I, sure, that sounds interesting. After spending an 8-hour shift with him, that's pretty much all that it took, and I was pretty much hooked on the law enforcement career path.
Another unexpected happening helped to further solidify Brian's career path in law enforcement, even though it delayed his plans for post-secondary education.
I enjoyed drafting. I was decent in math, and I thought, well, maybe I could either be an engineer or an architect. And I'd actually applied to some schools, some colleges with that in mind. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, as the case turned out, is when the deputy from across the street came over, and so my career path changed. And I went from wanting to attend college immediately after high school. Instead, I was provided a job opportunity with the sheriff's office from that sergeant. I ended up being a communications dispatcher just merely a month out of high school. The strange part about that is I'd already enrolled in Mount Mercy because I knew I wanted to go the law enforcement track. And apparently I actually appeared in their yearbook along with my picture, but never attended, at that time, a day of class. So the moral of the story is I did go back and get my bachelor's degree from Mount Mercy, but it took a while longer.
He later earned a Master of Public Administration Criminal Justice. Brian has been employed by the Linn County Sheriff's Office for over 35 years. He was first elected Linn County Sheriff in 2008 and re-elected in 2012. His career remains his passion.
I think interacting with the public is very rewarding. I have the kind of job where you see people in their best and also in their worst. I like that aspect of being able to serve the community and hopefully doing a good job for the community and providing law enforcement protection.
He is also keenly focused on the relationship that law enforcement builds with school communities.
Not only do you have that law enforcement protection automatically in the schools, which this day and age actually is a good idea, but more importantly, you have that connection between the students and the faculty and law enforcement. So they get to be people. They're not just a uniform, they're not just a badge, they're actually people that you can interact with and share stories with, and hopefully, if the need arises, you could share important security-based or law enforcement-based issues. The goal of having those law enforcement officers in the schools is to keep everyone safe.
Brian looks back fondly at his high school experience, noting that instructors cared about their students and that it showed in the delivery of the education program. He recalls a few high-tech opportunities too.
What was kind of cool at the time were in driver's ed, you had those simulators that actually looked like cars, and they had windows, and they had speedometers, and they had gauge clusters, and you could see the big screen, and you'd get in the car and pretend you were driving. And I think most of us wanted to figure out how fast we could go before the instructor could find out that we were goofing around. But that was great technology. We thought, how could it ever get any better than this? And now everything's done on computer. We had typewriters back then. They do it in the preschool, if not grade schools. And that's a good thing, because even in my career, everything's based off of computers now also. We need to make sure the people we are hiring are very proficient with the use of computers and computer programs. When I went through school, ethics was very important, and the teachers were instilled that in us. Whether it be your track coach or your baseball coach, and certainly they tried to instill that in cooperative efforts. But I think even my teachers did. I look back at certain teachers, and it's funny, on the way over here today I was trying to, can I name teachers from my past? And actually I was able to name off several. They were influential in not only my education but also my career. It's nice to be able to look back, which I'm certainly very clearly able to do, with fond memories of not only high school but also my entire education through the Cedar Rapids Community School District. In fact, my wife and I made it a point to make sure we lived within that district.
We're pleased to congratulate District alumnus Brian Gardner on his distinguished professional career and to thank him for his commitment to service. We're thrilled that he remains a dedicated Kennedy Cougar.